Time to talk about the devastating flood situation in the country. More than 2.5 million people in Nigeria are in need of humanitarian assistance, 60% of which are children and are at increased risk of waterborne diseases, drowning and malnutrition due to the most severe flooding in the past decade, according to UNICEF. The floods, which have affected 34 out of 36 states in the country, have displaced 1.3 million people. Over 600 people have lost their lives, and over 200,000 houses have either been partially or fully damaged. Cases of diarrhea and waterborne diseases, respiratory infection, and skin diseases have already been on the rise. In the northeastern states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe alone, a total of 7,485 cases of cholera and 319 associated deaths were reported as of 12th of October. As rains are expected to continue for several weeks, humanitarian needs are also expected to rise. Now, let's further analyze these issues, looking for ways to tackle it headlong. We have Nelson Ekujumi. He is a public affairs analyst and he joins us virtually. Thank you for joining us, Nelson.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Now, let's start from the root cause of this issue. Now, the Minister of Water Resources, Suleiman Adamu, had earlier said that rainfall and not excess water from the Lagdo Dam in Cameroon is responsible for the flooding ravaging various communities across over 30 states in the country. And of course, this is against the popular opinion that it's due to the flood or the dam that was opened in Cameroon. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you very much. You know, when we make statements at times, we make them from the point of ignorance. And if people saddled with that responsibility in that area of our life come out to say, no, this is what has happened, it behoves on us, if we don't have contrary facts to substantiate our position, rather we should do an investigation in order to be able to corroborate or deny or counter whatever must have been dished out to us in the public. This issue of the cause of the flood, we are all aware that early in the year, the meteorological services warned that there will be excessive rainfall this year, and people living in lowlands and areas that are prone to flooding were advised early enough, to relocate. But in our usual way as human beings, until the house is on fire, we don't seem to care about whatever advices we are giving. So here we are. But that statement by the minister, one want to take it that is speaking from the position of authority. But as we speak now, except experts come out and say, what the minister has said is not right. I want to, hold my breath and, watch events unfold.
Well, he had also said that the flood, or rather the Lagdo Dam, is only contributing about 1% to the flood situation. But let's look at what you said earlier, that NIMET came out to talk about how people who were living on lowlands should move to the higher plains, to avoid being flooded. But what alternatives are provided for those people? Because it's not enough to just issue warnings or alerts telling people to relocate or change their, residential areas. Is it enough to do that? What about providing alternatives and also ensuring that these people are well provided for in terms of, shelter? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay. The truth of the matter is that, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Can I go on?
Yes, you can.
Yeah. The truth of the matter is that the government cannot provide alternatives for every person affected. Once you are advised, it is expected that you have relatives, you have other alternatives that you can make use of. Then the government also has a responsibility to provide alternatives for, for some and not all, because the government, you and I know very well, does it, to provide alternatives for all those that will be affected. But most importantly, we should note that when advisory like this are given.
All right, Nelson Okujumi there, public affairs analyst, talking to us about the impact of this flood and what can be done to tackle the situation headlong. Looking at the fact that this isn't the first time we would be having this situation on our hands. Back then in 2012, we had a very devastating situation with the loss of lives and property. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'll let you land on that thought before we proceed.
Yes, I was saying that when advisory like this are given, it is expected that all tiers of government, will be alive to their responsibility, both at the local and the state government levels, because they are the ones closest to the people. The federal government is supposed to play a supporting role to whatever the local governments and the states have done. But in most cases, we have seen that we have allowed the local governments and the state governments to abdicate their responsibility. And we want to assume that every happenings in the country is that of only the federal government alone, as though we have only one single tier of government, which is not the case. So we want to ask, when this advisory was given, what role did the local governments in these affected states, as well as the state government, what did they put on ground to mitigate this likely occurrence, which has finally happened now that we are, all, confronted with? So those are the questions we should ask ourselves.
Well, sadly, all attention is always on the central government, that's the federal government. But let's assess the impact of this precarious situation on the country, the economy generally. For instance, the hike in fuel and food prices. We know currently, even just this morning, you can see the fuel queues all over filling stations, submerged communities, inaccessible roads, displaced residents, and deaths have marked the humanitarian crisis caused by this massive flooding. Let's look at all of these and the impact it would have generally on the economy.
Oh, the impact this will have on the economy is devastating. The impact will not be felt only now, but we should look at the impact beyond today. We should look at the impact years going forward. We should look at the impact in terms of food crisis. We should look at the impact in terms of infrastructural crisis. We should look at the impact in terms of housing crisis. We should look at the impact in terms of energy crisis. The impact cannot be encompassed in a single, statement like this, because those roads that have been, affected, definitely those roads will definitely collapse. Buildings that have been taken over, they are susceptible to collapse. The economy, you look at food production against next year, definitely farms that have been eroded, will not be able to, give us their own contribution to our food situation, and it will make the price of goods and services beyond the reach of you and I. As we speak, like you rightly mentioned, we're having energy crisis. There's fuel queues everywhere, and we all know that it's a result of this flood. Presently, the LNG told us that they were suspending production or transportation, and we all know the effect of that on domestic gas, the price. So the effect of this flooding, it's a national calamity, if you ask me, because lives have been lost, businesses have been destroyed. The consequences is not something we can capture right now.
Indeed.
Days going forward, we must put this at the back of our mind that, look, this is the reverberating aftermath of this flood that we have experienced.
Well, we most likely may not be able to quantify the losses, as you said, because looking at the comprehensive assessment of the total losses resulting from the 2012 flooding, which ravaged many states of the Federation, it showed that Nigeria lost a total of 2.6 trillion naira, with a massive displacement of people and loss of farmlands. Looking at what is happening this year, we've already seen loss of farmlands, submerged communities, as you said. What is in the offing for the average Nigerian? We know that right now inflation is soaring. The last figure was put at 20.77%. What is coming? What is in the offing in the coming days for Nigerians? All
to
right. So,
expect.
yes, go
Yeah, I
ahead,
can
please.
hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
From this flooding, we should expect that things will be a bit tighter going forward to next year because of the reverberating effects, which we cannot quantify. But I was watched on the national TV where the president has given the Minister of Water
Water
Resources a
resources.
night.
90-day ultimatum. Yes, so he was talking about the ultimatum that the president has given the Minister of Water Resources, that Suleiman Adamu, saying that he has to come up with a plan as to how to prevent flooding. But the question would be, isn't this coming late in the day, as we have been asking? Nelson, welcome back.
Yes, it's not coming late in the day because at every tier of government we have not done our bits. We have all lagged in our responsibility, and that is why we are here. So, as the president has given the marching order to the Minister for Water Resources, you and I should ask the state government what are their plans. We should ask the local government administration what are their plans also, going forward. We had this type of flooding in 2010, and here we are in 2022 experiencing a similar scenario, which is an indication that as a people we don't learn from history, and it is a fact that those who don't learn from history end up being consumed or repeating the same line of history, a historical fact. So going forward, the responsibility is on all of us to ensure that we put our heads on the ground and have a time frame to prevent a reoccurrence of this happening that is taking place 12 years after again, such that next 12 years going forward,
10 years after,
we will not come back to this same story. It is a collective responsibility, if you ask me.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's analyze the impact of this on education. The governor of Bayelsa State, Doye Diri, lamented recently that all the primary and secondary schools in the state have been converted to IDP camps. And he talked about the fact that the whole state is now looking like one big IDP camp, sadly. Will this not further increase Nigeria's out-of-school children? Right now, it is put at 20 million. Are we not looking at an increase in the number of out-of-school children?
Absolutely. We should be looking at that. When children cannot go to school, what will happen? Like we say, idle mind is the devil's workshop. When there are no more classrooms, teachers have been relocated. Teachers have been dehumanized, or they have been, they have lost their means of accommodation. How will they be able to teach? The environment to teach is not there. So definitely, where are the children going to learn? With even communication that we are talking about will be affected, because if the areas are submerged, you can expect that even telecommunication equipment will have been damaged or will have been submerged under the water. So everything, every economic life, social and political life in that environment will definitely come to a halt. And if it comes to a halt, definitely our children that will be out of school, the numbers will increase within this time frame, except we are able to come up with an alternative plan to mitigate this occurrence with regards to getting the children engaged somehow, some way.
Well, the Lagos state government also recently alerted residents of the state on imminent flooding in the state. The agency on Thursday was reacting, that's LASEMA, Lagos State Emergency Management Agency, was reacting to the alert by the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, NIMET, about the intensity of flooding to be caused by heavy rainfall and the release of water from Onyo Dam. What is the level of preparedness for this, looking at the fact that it's not a new phenomenon? Are there viable alternatives? Do you see us getting better ready to tackle this situation as we speak right now? It is raining, further complicating the flood situation in some areas.
I think based on the foregoing developments, like we have just filled out, I think it is important for us as a people and a government to engage and make people recognize the fact that where
All right, Nelson Ekujumi talking to us about how to deal with this issue of flooding in the country. It is a devastating issue, but it is not happening for the first time. And one would expect that the government of the day would be better prepared to tackle the situation, seeing that it is not happening. It is not a new phenomenon. All right, Nelson Ekujumi, if you can hear me, I'd like to hear your final thoughts on this issue as we coast home. All right, I guess we'll just leave the conversation there. And of course, we've been talking about the flood situation in the country. We'll take a break now. When we come back, it will be time to discuss other issues. Please stay with us. All right, let's wrap up the conversation with Nelson Ekujumi. I'd like to hear your final thoughts, Nelson, on this issue. How can we tackle this challenge of flooding in the country so that we can prevent future reoccurrence?
Yes, I think going forward, as a government and a people, we need to engage, and the government make our people to recognize that some areas where people have built their houses cannot be allowed. People must be moved away from those environments permanently if we cannot prevent those areas from being affected by either rainfall or release of water from the dams. The government should make that very, very clear and start the process of rehabilitating such people who have encroached on areas that they are not supposed to build their houses. This is one of the ways we can, avoid this reoccurrence.
All right, thank you so much for your thoughts on the show, Nelson Ekujumi, and have a fine day. After the break, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has announced the introduction of a national domestic card scheme, which is effective January 16, 2023. And according to the Apex Bank, the move is aimed at promoting stability, inclusion, and growth in the financial and payment system, and will be delivered through the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System, PLC. We'll discuss this in detail after the break. Don't go anywhere.